Oh, well, I just got done putting the blow-through carburetor together for the Nova. Figured I'd go through it. There's a handful of videos out there. Everybody's got their own, ways of doing things. I won't say this is the only way to do it, obviously, because there's about 100 different ways you can put one of these together and make it work. So, first thing, I'll just start at the base plate and kind of go through what I did. Really, the only thing with the base plate is there's two holes. One right here next to that screw. That's kind of hard to see in the camera, but you get the point. And you look at the base plate. There's one there, and there's one right here. Those holes go through into the bowls, and if you don't plug that, your boost reference power valves will not open. The pressure in the bowls and the pressure under the intake will equalize or be close, and it won't let it open. So I bought power valves, boost reference ones, from Simple Stage. The one nice thing about them is you don't have to grind out the main body for clearance. This little guy is small enough, it fits in there, and that's how you adjust how much boost it takes to open it with that little screw. There's a spring and the little ball. Once boost is applied to it, it opens up. So, the actual metering plate changes. It's probably the most intimidating part of this, that people have different ways of doing it. But basically what I started with was I drilled out the two main wells right there. You can see this other one here. You can see those two brass plugs. So the center main wells on this one I drilled out to, I think, 180 thousandths. You obviously have to drill the top section of it a little bit bigger to tap it for the little pipe plugs that go in it. And you've got to tap them down far enough that they sit flush. That way it will clear when you put it on the carburetor. The other thing on the main wells, or the other thing on the metering plates, this emulsion well right here, this whole thing, you just fill it with epoxy. So you drill out the channel, which supplies to your main jets. This body right here gets opened up. But then on the back side, this all gets filled in. Cover that all with epoxy, because you don't really want emulsion in a blow-through setup. You can see the epoxy there. Pretty easy to do. Yeah, I mean, don't be intimidated doing the metering plates. I mean, if you screw one up, they're real easy to fix. You just throw it in the shit can and start over on another one. So you'll get some practice if you screw one up. You don't have to have it in a drill press. I use the bench vise, and just make sure your drill bit is straight, not drilling at an angle when you're doing the main wells. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, fairly easy. The other thing is the power valve channel restrictors right here. They're pretty hard to see because the stock ones are really small. I want to say I took mine out to 93 thousandths. They're anywhere from 70 thousandths to 110 thousandths. You gotta be careful when you drill them, because you just kind of have to feel for the angle that hole is at. You don't want to just go crazy and drill all the way through the main well. You just want to drill into the main well. Some guys say they drill them out and tap them and then put in a little drilled restriction. It's not that critical, really. I mean, if you're trying to nail it down, you adjust the boost reference power valve a couple of times to get your fuel curve where you want it. I don't know that you're going to gain a ton there of adjustability or increased drivability by going to the extent of trying to put a metered orifice in there. So punch it out to 70 to 100 thousandths. Always better to start small and work your way up as you drive it a little bit. You can figure out where that needs to be with your setup. What else? We'll go through the main body. This started out as a Holley 9379, I think, which is just a competition 750. It does have the annular boosters, which is what I wanted, not the down legs. So annular boosters are good, and a blow-through setup. This is a down leg setup, if you don't know the difference. See how the boosters are down further into the carburetor. That's the old gas setup off of this thing when it was naturally aspirated, and it's just a parts carburetor now. I had the choke horn milled off of it. This thing didn't originally come with a choke, it came with a choke horn, but milled the choke horn off. I did leave the center post. Most guys just blow those off of there when they cut them, and I left the vent tube extensions for this setup, which I'll talk about in a second. The other thing you want to make sure to do is that hole right there has to be plugged. This has a piece of brass in it. You can see there's two little tabs that hold that piece of brass in there. You can epoxy that up. You can do whatever you want there. Just make sure it's sealed up. I go through and I plug up all my accessory holes on the carburetor. You don't necessarily have to, but it's just good insurance if you're not going to use it for anything. I guess if you were going to try to put a micro switch on it or something, you could use that as a bracket or bolt holes, but I'm not going to do that with this one. It's easy just to plug them all up with epoxy when you're doing the main wells, and you're done. The primary bowl, there's nothing really special in there. It has a boost reference power valve. You don't put like any extension or anything, obviously, in the primary side. I worked on a guy's carburetor the other day, and he had jet extensions in the front. Like, well, I thought that's what you needed. No. So when you think about it, when this thing's under load, like when you're accelerating, all your fuel is getting forced to the back of the carburetor. So that's why you put the extensions on the rear. That keeps your jets and that power valve submerged in fuel at the back of the bowl. And on the primary side, you don't want them extended. You want them up against the metering plate because that's where all the fuel is going to be shoved back to. The other thing, this rear boost referenced power valve, you can see that center extension. Jet extensions are the bottom ones. They just slide over the jets. I tend to like those better than the thread end body style. Just less of a restriction. These are stainless. You can get them in brass. You can get them whatever. I want to say these are BLPs. You do have to cut down that extension tube for the simple stage valve. So you can see how long that was when it started. And I just trimmed it down, smashed it, bent it, got it to clear with my float. That's the other piece that took probably the longest out of everything, was clearance on the rear float. So you have to clearance that, or the float will not drop down far enough. I mean, if your float hangs up here and drops down and only has that much range of motion, it's not going to fill very fast, and you're going to starve the secondary side. So that float has to be able to drop down to allow fuel to flow into the bowl. So that's one thing you want to be sure you do. Don't skip that step. Next, the big, what the hell is all this? So basically this is a, I guess you call it a pitot tube setup. This extends through the top hat. This sits on there. And the point or reason for that is as air is coming through, when it makes the 90-degree turn, it gets turbulent. So if you don't have anything down here, you're trying to cram air down that little bitty extension into the bowl to pressurize the bowl so it gets good signal. If you extend them up into basically the linear stream of air coming in before it makes that 90-degree, you get a lot better charge going into your bowls, and it improves your signal, improves your metering. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. Anybody, if you're running a blow-through and you don't have that done, take the time and do it. One other thing that I see a lot of people do, their hats are 90 degrees or I don't know, some random angle, whatever made the piping easier to do. Talking to guys that are faster than me, that have been doing this blow through thing longer than I have, they said either make it straight or make it 180. So straight out the back of the carb or straight out the front of the carb. When you do your piping, set it up that way. They just seem to have better luck, better atomization, better, overall signal. I'm assuming that's just because the way the air, when it makes the turn, not hitting, any of these ridges or anything, it has basically a straight shot into the venturis through the throat of the carburetor. So I don't know, makes sense to me. Air's kind of stupid. It's gonna follow and smooth out as it has a longer run. So a little spacer is a good thing. I saw one the other day that I helped a buddy on, and he had one of those real low profile hats on it that's like a ½ inch tall. And yeah, that thing's a piece of shit. So don't use one of those. Get at least the standard height, and if you want to add a ring to it, add a ring to it. That's what I did to this one. But yeah, other than that, it's just going to be kind of a guess and check with the AFR gauge in the car on how I set my boost reference valves. So I just made a note on my carburetor. You can see it's 84 jet. The boost actuated power valve is 0 turns from flush, and on the rear I'm going to run it 2 turns from flush. I'm sure I could probably devise a way to test that and get closer to actually figuring out how much boost it takes to open that thing. But yeah, I didn't do that. Didn't build the test rig, so we're just going to try it out and go from there. Yeah, looking at this metering block, I think there was one thing maybe I didn't point out. Those right there. So you filled your emulsion wells up. That hole right there gets drilled out also. And I want to say that one was 125 thousandths, 130 thousandths, something. Again, it's kind of like when you were drilling the power valve channel restrictors. You don't go crazy. You just, you can start with a smaller bit and work your way up, but you want to find that line, that angle that it's drilled at. And you take a small bit and you can shove it right in there, just so you know kind of the angle you should be using with the drill. But you can see how much smaller the original one is versus the blow-through one. It's not a huge difference, but it is significant. So yeah, that's it. I saw a few videos out there that really didn't cover a lot of the finer details, I guess, especially with the plugging of the base plate. Yeah, those 2 holes right there. I do mine a little different than some of the other videos too. Some of the guys tap it from the bottom and plug it right here. They put in a little 632 brass plug. I don't do that. I actually epoxy the base plate solid. So I take the base plate off, epoxy the bottom, and fill it on both sides and make it flush. And then I actually put my brass plugs in the bottom of the main body, which you can't really see from here, but that way you don't tap all the way through that little boss that's right there. You leave a little bit of material so when you run that 632 set down, it has something to kind of tighten against. You don't thread it all the way through. That's what these little guys are for. When you buy that simple stage valve, they give you the little tap drill to do it. But yeah, I mean, it's not too bad. We'll see how it goes. If I ultimately don't like the blow-through setup, I'll probably look at EFI, but I'm hoping the blow-through gives me a little bit more cooling than, just the intercooler alone. So we'll see how it goes, and here before too long I'll have that engine back from the shop. Got a Reed Power Glide sitting over there with a 158 gear set in it. So yeah, this thing should be a pretty bad bitch when it's all back together. as long as I can get the blow-through setup figured out and make everything work. That's it. Maybe this summer I'll have some videos of it going down the road. See ya. Good luck.